Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello, welcome to the Science for Sport podcast. I am your host, Richard Graves. You might be asking, where's Matt Solomon? That is a good question. He usually sits in this seat, but he's not here today because he is this week's special guest. What is going on, you might ask? Well, I'm not going to explain it to you when we can hear from the man himself. So this week's special guest on the Science for Sport podcast is Matt Solomon. Here he is.
Bringing you powerful stories and insights to elevate your performance. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Well, Matt, everything's not as it should be and about face, because I'm sat here in your chair. You're sat in the seat that the guest would usually be in. So I'm going to start this chat by asking you what you've asked everybody for the last, 239 episodes of this podcast. Tell the listeners a bit about yourself and why you're sat where you are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was sat in your seat. It looks like there's some cool stuff going on behind you. But yeah, so I'm the former host of the Science of Sport podcast. And Rich, you're very kindly taking the mantle. So I'm Matt Solomon. I've done 239 episodes of the Science of Sport podcast as host, and not a single one as a guest until now. I'm originally from the UK. I live in the Netherlands. I did a degree and a master's in sports science. I moved to the Netherlands. I did an internship with Tessa Arnhem. I moved to the Emirates and worked with the football team in Dubai. I moved back to the Netherlands and did an internship with the Olympic Team. I worked there for 7 years, focusing predominantly on Paralympic athletes. So, managed to get some decent success with different teams there. So, medals across 2 Paralympic Games, European World Championships, all that good stuff in between. Work with teams like handball, for example, but also para table tennis, paracycling, para badminton, wheelchair basketball was probably the biggest stint, or the biggest amount of time that I spent in any sport during that time. Ski, snowboard, managed to help people be successful in pretty much all of those, which is really good. So until very recently, I was in Paris and managed to see some fantastic results there, and very recently, I was contacted and asked whether I'd be interested in working at Ajax. And obviously, that's very difficult to say no to. So, as of officially the 1st of November, I'll be starting as physical development coach with Ajax first team. I'm super excited for that. So I've had a couple of days already, getting a little bit of a head start, and it's been a good first week so far. So far so good, and really excited for what the future holds.
Yeah, absolutely, a fantastic opportunity. Huge congratulations on that, and I guess in many respects, an opportunity to put into practice what the listeners have learnt, heard about week in, week out. For what is it now? 4 years this podcast's been going. Was it coming? The pandemic wasn't the first episode. Looking back,
I've no idea when the first episode was, because what actually happened was we released monthly, like for members. We released monthly for maybe a year and a half before we went weekly and public. So I mean, there's also like an extra year of me recording stuff monthly, but not weekly. Before that. So the first episode feels like it's been a very, very long time ago now. Like pretty much as far back as I can remember, I've just been doing this every week, and then you're kind of sat there, just part of life now. So yeah, as of next week, I'm kind of like, oh, shit, what do I do with this free time? What do people do with like if people have recommendations for hobbies and stuff, just let me know. Like that'd be great.
You're happy to hear from them, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. And drinking is not a hobby, by the way. You reprobates.
You've spoken to a wide array of guests over the course. You said this is episode 240. In that time, is there any one subject, one episode that has stood out for you when you look back?
It's really, really difficult because there's a lot of very good episodes. It's very difficult to say that one is the best one. I think when we look back through the numbers and stuff, I think there was one with Mike Boyer, which had a particularly polarizing title. I think so, like bilateral training is dead, unilateral is king, something like that. And I think a lot of people listen to that because, firstly, Mike Boyle is a big name, and secondly, like that just kicked off. People started getting angry about it on social media, which works really well for podcast listens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mike does a good job of explaining that as well. So I think that one stands out in terms of being probably the best listened to episodes. Along the way, yeah, it's really difficult to pinpoint one or two like really, really top quality episodes because there's been so many good guests, and it'd be quite unfair on a lot of the good guests to mention maybe one or two. But I think probably the best episodes, without naming them specifically, the best content or the best podcasts which I've listened to are the people who really, really understand their topic and they give something just a little bit different. Looking back, there was an episode with Luis Mesquita, who I managed to meet in Portugal and have relatively good contact with. And Luis, he did a podcast on basically a type of training where you do exactly the same workout all of the time. And as long as you can deal with the frequency of that training, you can use that as a measurement tool. So if you can measure, for example, the bar velocity, or your jump height, or whatever your key outcome might be, you can see and plot that over time, right? So ideally, you keep going up, and obviously there's fluctuations within that. And I found that a really interesting concept. I mean, it's not a new concept. It's just a concept which is used in throwing sports predominantly. So that kind of periodization is a really interesting topic. And I think that triggers people to think differently. So although in a pure sport like throwing, it's really clear, like you either throw further or you don't. You can still apply the same principles to other sports as well, right? Just to maybe, instead of like quite as a polarized model where it's like you have to do this, maybe you can just apply that to one or two exercises and then track that over time. So I think episodes where people have come in with a thought process, which might not necessarily be the latest science. It might have been something that's done in Russia in the 80s, but just with a fresh look on it, who can communicate that really well and keep it as simple as possible without necessarily having to get into the complexity of why those things all happen. And just give really practical examples. So just like going through, like, this is my process. This is what I do. Here's some underpinning principles. Here's some science, without having to get bogged down in everything that everyone has ever written about it. So those for me are the podcasts which really hit home. And they're generally communicated really well as well. And there's been a ton of people who've done that.
Yeah, and if I can say so, from the perspective of a listener, I think the beauty of the podcast since you started has been that on the surface, you seem to be tackling subjects and issues that might appear to only relate to professional athletes. And yet there was an episode in the summer with two guys from North America that were coming over, and it was basically about how can you create the best regime, if you like, the best structure with minimal stuff to do so. Well, you, me, Joe Public down the road, everybody can relate to that. And I think that's the beauty of the podcast in essence.
Yeah, I think it gives people the chance to find something at everyone's level, right? So I think what one of the things that we did pretty well was to make sure that the questions asked go from really easy to at least semi-complex, without potentially being like
so it had
the
something
most difficult
for everyone.
information. Exactly, yeah. So generally speaking, we try and make sure that the guests go through a process of explaining what the thing is, why it's important, and then some physiology or some science underpinning it, and then how to practically apply that. And I think probably the practical application is the most important bit. But because of the steps that the podcast guests take the listeners through, it helps that you could be an athlete who, for example, is just interested in physical training or sports science or whatever it might be. But you could be a coach who sat there and also getting triggered to think about different things and the way that they might implement their practice. So, I think the fact that there is a little bit for everyone in almost every episode is really useful, especially for athletes, maybe young practitioners, and even some more experienced practitioners who are just looking for something short and sharp, right? So most of the episodes are 20, 30 minutes. my commute now is going to be like an hour and a half. So, I mean, I can
A little bit
absolutely smash through all of these episodes. But normally a normal person's commute is probably somewhere between half an hour, maybe 40 minutes if the traffic's bad. So you can get that in, and you can pay attention to it, because everyone's attention span now is about 10 seconds long. So I don't know about you, but I listen to a few podcasts, and like after 30 or 40 minutes, I'm gone. Just going to listen to radio and come back.
It's whether you're aware of it or not. That's the reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So sometimes for people like myself who can't pay attention to stuff, but yeah.
Now, also, it'd be amiss of me not to point out that this podcast, from its inception, it's gone on the last few years, but it's also set to a backdrop of a presenter, a host that has been around the globe, got various experiences in different environments, different settings, different pressures, games, Olympics, Paralympics. Tell us a bit about that journey as well.
Yeah. So, where to begin? I studied, like everyone probably did, or most people probably did, in the field, and realised I probably wanted to do something not in Birmingham. Which is a lovely area of the world for some, but like, it's also an absolute hellhole in some areas, especially the student areas there. They were not great. But so I travelled a little bit, and moved to the Netherlands. At which point, I was kind of like, right, do I commit to this? Do I go like absolutely balls to the wall, or do I just kind of half-ass it? And I'm not really a half-ass it person. I'm kind of 100% or not. And went all in on learning the language. Like, I'm here to stay.
You can speak fluent Dutch now, can't you?
Yeah, for sure. So like, I work in Dutch every day. Like, I'll listen to English radio when I get home so that I can de-Dutch myself. It's like a cleanse. It's like getting the shower after you've worked out, right? Like, just get rid of that, and now I can think.
That is leaving work at work, right?
I try. It's not always possible, but like I'll coach in Dutch and work in Dutch, and I think that's probably a big lesson as well for people listening who are thinking about doing similar things. It's like getting yourself stuck into that culture. It helped massively, and it still helps massively, right? So, I mean, the Dutch is a pretty terrible example of why you should learn a language, because Dutch people speak great English. But it's useless, mate. Like, 18 million people in the world, a few out of Belgium, like, who all also speak brilliant English. And you're kind of sat there going, why did I do that? That was loads of effort. I could have learned like Spanish or French or something. I don't know. But anyway, so my useless skill is effective in very specific work environments, to save some people the effort of having to speak English, which they can do perfectly anyway. So, but what that does do is it opens up more conversations. It means that you hear more. You can feel the room a little bit better. I'm pretty confident that when athletes are under a bar and they're squeezing out like hard reps, having to think about what they're going to say in English or doing that, it's probably not an ideal scenario. So I think culturally it allows you to adapt to that environment a lot better. You're allowed to pick up more information, and it makes things a lot easier. So again, Dutch is a terrible example as to why you might want to do that, but in other countries and other places, I'm sure that's far more relevant. And with the populations that I worked with, there were some people who couldn't speak English as well. So with some physical disabilities, there might be a mental component, and that might make it more difficult to speak English. At which point, it's actually essential to be able to speak Dutch, otherwise you can't communicate properly. So I've also worked in environments where, although I joke that Dutch people can speak perfect English, that there might be one or two where it's a little bit more difficult, especially in youth populations where they might not be quite as confident. So I think, getting buy-in from athletes through that, getting buy-in through stuff from staff, and just being able to immerse yourself more in that environment can be really powerful when moving through countries.
Yeah, we've laughed about it, and you make light of being able to speak Dutch and how useful it is. But ultimately, you've been employed because of what you can do, your profession. That doesn't happen overnight. That's acquired through years of experience, training, and practical application. So for the listeners that aren't perhaps familiar with your journey, tell them a bit about that and how you've got to be where you are right now.
So obviously I talked through some of the sports and the bits and pieces there. So to zoom in on that a little bit, I think it's good to focus on coming out of team sport, for example. So obviously a couple of years in a football environment, and I moved into handball with the Dutch Olympic team, and worked with the talent team there. And that was very similar, right? So you're talking about, it was like 16 to 18-year-old guys. And basically the sport of handball means that you just need to be a physical animal, or be really springy, light and fast. And there's a little bit in between, but basically the task was, these young kids, they need to be 10 to 20 kilos heavier, and they need to be absolute physical beasts. It's like, cool, let's go. And they're just like, at that age, they're just like hormones everywhere, and they just need to smell a dumbbell and they get big. So that was super fun. Obviously learned a lot through that journey, and switched into Paralympic sports. Not necessarily deliberately, but kind of fell into it. And at some point they go, well, you can do that, so you can do this. And then, yeah, all of a sudden you stood in Paris at the Paralympics thinking, oh, shit, this is all right. So in between there's a load of lessons as well, right? So going through working with different teams, working with different athletes, solving different problems. And I think probably the depths of that is getting into the principles of strength training and the principles of science without necessarily having an evidence base. So everyone's like, right, we need to be evidence based. I'm like, cool. By the time anyone's written an article on this, it's going to be 4 years later. And I could write the article on that, but I'm way too busy. So we're not going to do that.
It's
we're
funny,
going
isn't
to
it?
do our in-house research.
We talk about the impact of science on sport, but in this instance, it's not necessarily a science. No two individuals are exactly the same. How does that test you and what you know when you're relating to different athletes in different environments, different competitions?
I think probably the first thing to say about that is you never compare. So like our head coaches were really good on that. It's like, we do not compare athletes. And if I ever did, it would just be like, you're comparing. Oh shit, I am. So that as a principle is really simple, right? Like, no two people are the same. You and I might both go to the gym, and we might both squat, and we might both deadlift, but ultimately lever arms are going to be different, mentality might be different, how you're feeling on that day might be different, your muscles, your body, all of those interesting things. But ultimately the principle is you're an individual. So I think that on the front end, and that allows you to remove all of the potentially the methods, the training tools that you have, and strip that back to what do they actually need to achieve. So is it a tendon adaptation? Right, okay, we're going to look for that adaptation. So our principle is we're going to look for an adaptation, and we're going to then apply that adaptation to the sport. And if you're looking at that, you're able to strip away all of the methods that you would use, an plyometric, an isometric. Those things are just tools to reach the goal. So if you're looking at your principles of training, like, okay, my principle is individualization. Brilliant. So you individualize the training. My principle is I'm going to look for adaptations. Brilliant. I'm going to get the adaptation. Then you're going to apply that in a semi-sport specific manner, or you're going to get your transfer to the field in a certain way. And by solving lots of different problems in that sense, or solving very diverse problems, I think it allows you to strip away the superfluous crap, for one of a better way of saying it, and be like, right, okay, to achieve this, we need to do A, B, and C, and have confidence that those things will work. And I saw on social media the other day, like an image of a toothpaste tube being squeezed, and you can squeeze it wherever you want at the start, and you get adaptations. And I just alluded to it, right? Like, just 16 to 18-year-old guys smell a dumbbell, you get big. Brilliant. But when you've got a 35-year-old who is half broken and needs to be kind of nursed to a final, all of a sudden you've got to be really specific with what you're going to do, and you've not got the adaptive resources or the recovery possibilities to just throw everything at them. What you've got to go, right, okay, what's going to make a difference for this person? Is it volume? Is it intensity? Is it a specific exercise choice? Is it a specific method of training? Are these things going to be making a difference? And if they're not, what are we doing? So by going through that process multiple times, and In a team sport, you might have to do potentially less because you're not necessarily individualizing to that degree. By iterating endlessly, then I think it allows you to get to the core of what actually makes a difference a little bit quicker.
How challenging is that when in a certain scenario, what you tried doesn't work first time around? You do have to think outside of the box. It does test all your knowledge, your skill.
Super challenging for sure. I think as long as you've got like the guiding lights as such, you've got a path that you're going down. You're like, okay, well, we test because we need to know where we are. Right? Okay, so you're doing some testing, super important. You're like, well, our results aren't as good as we wanted, or they're not improving. It's like, well, then you can start to look back at your process and be like, well, actually, did we do the things that we wanted to do? Did they turn up the whole time? Like really, really simple things.
So it's about questioning yourself and methods as well.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like we mentioned the science side of it, right? But like this is science in its like most crude, horrible, dirty form. It's like we tested, we did some stuff, and then we tested again, and we're like, well, that wasn't what we wanted. So what did we do? What was the thing that happened in the middle? And I think by doing that and holding yourself accountable, and potentially the athletes as well, you can look back and be like, well, actually, like we missed 2 weeks training with this athlete because they were sick. Well, 2 weeks training, what's that as a percentage of the year? If you've got 50 training weeks a year, all of a sudden, percentage-wise, I'm not a mathematician, but that's a lot of percent. So, like, you're sat there going, are we doing the things that we should be doing? And yeah, ultimately, can you adjust based on what's necessary and fine-tune on a regular basis? I'm not saying test every week, right? But like, can you, with enough specificity or enough precision, be like, right, we need to change this to get that? And eventually, over time, you get to know the people, you get to know the systems that you're in, and you can start to, I think, make a more positive difference throughout that system.
I'll be honest with you, Matt. I am a frustrated sportsman. Never good enough to play at any great level. I've played village cricket, amateur golf, rugby, football, squash, you name it. I've pretty much played it. But each week when I listen to this podcast and now listen to you, I find it fascinating because, as I said right at the top of this discussion, these are all things, subjects that we as just frustrated sports people can relate to. And equally, I imagine when you are being tested to the very nth degree of what you know to be true and it isn't working, that's the challenge in itself that you want to overcome most. And in some cases, you might not find that answer. In more cases than not, hopefully you will. But when you look at your career to date, I imagine also there's moments that have given you great satisfaction. If there are one or two without naming the individuals, what would they be?
I think that's difficult, but I think honestly the things that have brought me the most joy and satisfaction are probably not the results. So for context, the results have been good. I've worked.
Let's be clear about that.
Let's put that like so. The majority of my times with wheelchair basketball. The wheelchair basketball women's team have for the last 8 years won every tournament. And that comes down to the fact that they are the most talented bunch of individuals you can imagine. They're brilliant at what they do and they work really hard on deserve. But the most rewarding moments are not necessarily the bit where they win. The most rewarding moments is seeing the bit afterwards, seeing them enjoy that winning moment. So for as an example, right, I was in Paris and I was there to do the gym sessions. And I was there actually not just for wheelchair basketball or for table tennis. I work with, I think, table tennis as well, but I was there for the whole Team Manel team to help them and assist them with any gym requirements they had. So that was my role. And at some point, I was asked, can you do the live video stream? So we have a video stream and that gets sent to the iPad, and the iPad, the coach does the technical analysis live for the players, right? So the assistant coach has that in her hand and she'll kind of code that. So she'll be like, offensive problem, whatever. So she'll code that in the moment, and then when the player comes off, because they obviously get switched, and she'll go over to the player and be like, right, okay, this was it, play that back, and then give them live feedback and live tactical advice. Go and do this differently next time. I was doing the camera for that. So I was at the games, and eventually they win gold. It's brilliant. But the moment that brought me most joy, yes, of course, winning was that moment was brilliant, right? Like, they worked so hard for it. But the moment that brought me most joy was seeing them all celebrating with their family in the corner with all the fans. That was the bit that I enjoyed the most. So that was the most rewarding part, and it's not the winning a medal or that the hard work was worth it. The hard work was worth it because the brilliant human beings that I worked with got what they deserved. And the feeling you get from that, it's the person thing as opposed to the work thing. Like, I love them to bits, and I would love them to keep being as successful as possible. And I would get just as much joy seeing them win stuff now when I'm not their coach as I would have done as their coach, just because they're brilliant humans and they deserve it. So yeah, for me, yes, winning is good. Yes, winning is important, and it keeps us all in a job. Like, really, really, really good stuff. But the most rewarding parts are not necessarily the bits where you win.
Yeah, sure. And now, of course, you're about to embark on a new challenge, and we certainly wish you all the success in that, even if it is robbing us of your thoughts and wisdom on this particular podcast. But look, you don't sit in this seat and run a show as successfully as you have done, as long as you've done, just on a wing and a prayer. So I'm sure along the way that there's people, guests, outside people that have helped you make it what it is now. So that the floor is yours. What would you say to them?
I think, yeah, there's just an opportunity to thank everyone, to be honest. So, I mean, the people listen to this, it baffles me. I'm like, there's people who actually listen to me speak on a weekly basis. Really? I talk absolute bollocks. What are you on about? So, like, to those people who managed to put up with me for the entire time, thank you very, very much. I do really appreciate that. Yeah, it's still, like, my mum doesn't listen, so she's not one of those people. I mean, I've insulted her multiple times, and she's never called me out on it. So she has no idea what I say on this. So it's genuinely not family who are listening. So thank you for those people who've just tuned in for the last 4 years to listen. But a massive thanks to the guests who come on. Literally hundreds of people have given up their time, ended up talking to me, which is a chore in of itself, and chatted afterwards as well. So it's not just the 20 minutes or 30 minutes that everyone hears, right? They've got to prepare that. I give them the questions beforehand, and afterwards we generally sit and we talk and fill out the hour. So we'll chat shit afterwards as well, and like, that's it. It's not a quick turnaround for those guys. So I think, yeah, I'm sure I really appreciate it. And the listens, and I say it every week, that I'm sure you guys appreciate it too. But yeah, I really do appreciate all of the guests that have come on. And I think probably more than anything, all of the guests and the Science Sport family as well, predominantly, who've saved me in all of those horrible situations where someone just falls out at the last moment. And like, we never missed a Monday. In 4 and a bit years, we never missed a Monday, and that's entirely down to the Science Sport team, because if it wasn't for them, I'd have missed a few Mondays. So massive
it's a true team effort, right?
It is. It really is. And they step in at the last moment, and they really step up to the plate. And I mean, there's plenty of people who have on hours' notice just rocked up and been, right, we'll nail this. Don't worry about it. So yeah, to those guys as well, thank you so much, because we wouldn't have done it without you guys too. So thank you very much for everyone's hard work and effort, and I do really, really appreciate it.
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of your loyal listeners as well, Matt, in saying thank you for fronting up this podcast and keeping it going and never missing a Monday, which is an unbelievable record in itself. And everybody wishes you the very best of luck in a new role at Ajax as well. You've got to promise us, however, this is not it. You will return to this show at some point.
I'll do my absolute best. Yeah, I'm sure we can wrangle it somewhere. But for now, it's going to be nice to focus on just one thing, and that's hopefully getting the best results possible in the coming season for Ajax. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I will certainly stay in touch, and when possible, I'm sure I'll put back on again and try and share some of my pearls of maybe not wisdom, but some kind of pearl.
We'll be keen to hear anything you've got, Matt. All the best in the new role, and thanks for the show and coming on today.
Thank you very much, Rich. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to speaking again soon.
Bringing you powerful stories and insights to elevate your performance. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
And that's it from Matt Solomon, for now at least. We wish him all the very best as he jets out to pastures new over there in Holland. And certainly, as you heard from him there, we look forward to getting him back on the show at some point in the new year to hear how things are going along for him out in Holland. Let me point you in the direction of the Science for Sport website, www.scienceforsport.com. There you can find the latest updates regarding the Science for Sport Academy, as well as having the option of reliving some of the highlights from the previous 239 editions of this podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, then it'd be fantastic if you can recommend us to a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. But from me, it's a huge thank you for listening this week. A huge thank you for Matt Solomon and all he's done regarding this podcast. And I look forward to speaking to you again next week.
Subscribe to the Science for Sport podcast now, wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more insights, resources, and to join the Academy, visit scienceforsport.com and connect with us on social media by searching for @ScienceForSport. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.